evening. Go ahead and have a seat. So I feel like these guys are still here. Usually I feel like they're unplugged and off faster. All of a sudden I go, wait, what's going on? A couple announcements. We have baptism in a couple weeks. We'll be looking forward to that time after second service. We'll be right here on the side yard. If you were at first service, the announcements were a little confusing on what we're doing or not doing for food. The church will provide the burgers and the dogs, and the rest is just potluck. So whatever else you want to bring for that, if you think that, whatever you think goes with it. Usually people bring pizza, and pizza kind of goes with everything, you know? So if you want to bring pizza, you can still bring pizza. If you just want to bring some chips, that's good too. Or if you want to bring a dessert, we've never turned away a dessert here, I don't think, in this church, in the history of this church, I don't think we ever have. So anyway, it's going to be a good time. Or if you're going, I don't really know that I can bring anything, then don't. Just show up and enjoy potluck and enjoy fellowship, and we're going to have a good time. We are going to be setting up during second service, and so like Thomas and Pastor Zeke will be kind of leading that out there so that right from second service we can just go right out and start enjoying ourselves. So if you think that you know how to work like on a team, but also quietly, that's the other thing, because it's like right there out that door, then come to first service and then hang out and set up second service with those guys. So there's that. But that's not this Sunday. That's like next Sunday. This coming Sunday, we're going to start the book of Colossians. And so if you want to join us on Sunday mornings for Colossians, or really if you want to read ahead, you could start reading ahead. I don't know if you're anything like me. Philippians, one of my favorite books. It's like, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's like joy, just joy all the time. Just rejoice. It's joy all the time. And it's like, hey, even when things are hard, it's just so simple. Colossians is kind of a deeper, I've always had a hard time with Colossians. So be praying for me as I go through Colossians to try to, just like, some people are just a lot smarter than me. It's just like, oh, Colossians is a super easy book, but it's not always super easy for me. So anyway, be praying for that. Last week, we were in Deuteronomy 22. And it was a nice and awkward chapter to talk about some of the things that we talked about, a lot of laws about sexual morality and what biblical sexuality is. We had a nice little PG-13 warning last week, and today not too much of that, I don't think. But the computer broke during that time, so the recording, if you're like, boy, I really needed to watch that again, that's why it didn't get put up on the website, because the computer broke. And so pray for Thomas as he's like in charge of worship and the sound ministry. It's like as soon as everyone gets trained, I was telling James this, as soon as everyone is like on the same page, trained, everyone finally understands how to like do the soundboard and do the thing, and now it's like, oh, and now the computer broke. So now we have to start over, and we actually have to do it different because we're actually putting too much pressure on that computer. So now there's like 2 different computers that have to happen in the back. It's a whole thing. So be praying for the sound people. It's never easy to do the sound, right? And what do they say? The best sound person is the one that you don't know about. And so they do a really good job of doing that, but it is pretty hard. So anyways, chapter 23 today. It starts awkward, but it gets better. Let's read. I want to read through the entire chapter. We're going to read through all 25 verses, and then we'll come back and talk about it. He who is emasculated by crushing or mutilation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. One of illegitimate birth shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord. An Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, but the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. You shall not seek their peace nor their prosperity all your days forever. You shall not abhor the Edomite, he is your brother. You shall not abhor the Egyptian, because you were an alien in his land. The children of the 3rd generation of them may enter the assembly of the Lord. When the army, verse 9, goes out against your enemies, then keep yourself from every wicked thing. If there is any man among you who becomes unclean by some occurrence in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come inside the camp, but it shall be when evening comes that he shall wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may come into the camp. Also, you shall have a place outside the camp where you may go out. You shall have an implement among your equipment, and when you sit down outside, you shall dig with it and turn and cover your refuse. For the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, that he may see no unclean thing from among you and turn away from you. Verse 15, you shall not give back to his master a slave who has escaped from his master to you. He may dwell with you in your midst in the place which he chooses within one of your gates where it seems best to him. You shall not oppress him. Verse 17, there shall be no ritual harlot of the daughters of Israel, or a perverted one of the sons of Israel. You shall not bring the wages of a harlot or the price of a dog to the house of the Lord your God, for any vowed offering for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. You shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money or food or anything that is lent out at interest. To a foreigner you may charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all to which you set your hand in the land which you are entering to possess. Verse 21, when you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and it would be sin to you. But if you abstain from vowing, it shall not be sin to you. That which has gone from your lips you shall keep and perform, for you voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. Verse 24, when you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in a container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. Okay, maybe there was some awkward stuff in there. It's fine. It's no big deal. Okay, maybe a slight PG-13 warning today. We're in Deuteronomy. We're in that second reading of the law. And why is it the second reading of the law? It's the new generation. These are the younger guys. They're ready to enter the land. They're right outside the land of Canaan. They have been traveling in the wilderness 39 plus years now, right? They came out of Egypt as slaves. God set them free. Here they are, ready to go into the promised land after all this wandering. And the older generation had died out. The ones there at Mount Sinai that heard the voice of the Lord had died out. Leviticus, that happened right there at Mount Sinai, was really pertaining to the Levites. Everyone knew what God told the Levites to, but this reading of the law here in Deuteronomy for that next generation really speaks, and it's very similar to what we saw in like Exodus chapters 21, 22, 23, but there is some stuff that we see that is different here, but it's really written for the people as they get ready to go in. These things that Moses says are different sermons that he's giving to the people, these farewell sermons. So verse 1, again, we're kind of in that point where you might have noticed there was like not a real rolling theme throughout this. It was just like, oh, this and this and this and this. Just, kind of quick hits kind of rules. So the first one, he who is emasculated by crushing or mutilation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. So he's talking about castration here, right? The removal of the male sexual organs, very common back in that day, especially if someone had to work with a king or had to work around a king's harem. Usually the men that would work there would be castrated so that there was just no temptation to touch the king's stuff, right? And so it's not like something that had never been heard of before, but he says there's ways that it could happen. So this refers to that removal, that castration, by either a birth defect or by an accident or by this deliberate emasculation, whether it's, crushing, mutilating, okay, well, whatever. Now, when he says that he who is that guy cannot enter the assembly of the Lord, a lot of people, and there's a few things that we see in these first 8 verses about how you're to deal with certain types of people. First, we have this guy who's emasculated. Verse 2, it's those of illegitimate birth. Verse 3, it's the Ammonite and the Moabite. When you get into verse 7, it's the Edomite and the Egyptian. And so it's like, how do you deal with certain groups of people, and what can they or can't they do in Israel? Now, the assembly of the Lord, it often does refer to the people, the nation gathered before the Lord in worship like they did at Mount Sinai. However, this is not always the sense that this gives. There's several suggestions for what comprises the assembly of the Lord. One, it is the general community of Israel. Secondly, citizens of Israel, distinct from just residents. That's what would be called the assembly of the Lord. The third part would be that those that are permitted to come and gather for public worship or celebration or feast, right? But now this fourth one, and this is where a lot of commentators do agree that they think is what's being talked about here, the broad group of civil leaders and officials in Israel. And there is some good reason to regard this last sense as what it is. So when he says that they cannot be part of the assembly of the Lord, he's talking, and this is where I land, is that he's talking about the civil leadership of the country, politician types, right? Running for city council, being just in that kind of thing. So commentators here say it may very well be that these exclusions from the assembly of the Lord are not exclusions from the religious life of Israel, but from the political life of the nation. A guy named Poole, says that the idea of the assembly of the Lord is the leadership or the rulers of Israel. These people were barred not from the religious life, but from the political life of the nation. Other commentators agree with that. If by entering into the congregation be meant the bearing of civil office among the people, like a magistrate, a judge, etc., then the reason for the laws seem plain in a lot of these senses. Okay, so the first guy who can't do that is the guy who has been, like he says in verse 1, emasculated by crushing or mutilation. Okay, and the next one says the one of illegitimate birth. So unknown, parenting here, right? One of illegitimate birth shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, excuse me, even to the 10th generation, and none of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord. Illegitimate birth, we know what that means, right? First of all, like if you were born out of wedlock, that's what it would talk about. You remember with Jesus in John's gospel, you remember that there came a point that he was talking to them, and remember the accusation they had, that they go, hey, we weren't born of fornication like you were. Right? They had a real problem because the assumption is that they knew he wasn't Joseph's boy, but he was Mary's boy. And so they're like, obviously your mom was, they didn't revere Mary the way we would know because of what we see in the scriptures. So this whole fornication thing was a bad thing. But it is difficult to know totally what this means. And Jewish writers have defined this in different ways, and not all rabbis agreed on what this illegitimate birth meant. So some later guys define this as one who was born out of an incestuous relationship between Jews, and others say it refers to those of mixed marriages between the people of Israel and their pagan neighbors. And so they said if that's where the child comes from, so it kind of makes sense, right, that he couldn't enter into the civil leadership of the country if he might come from a relationship that's outside of the nation of Israel. Now, he says to the 10th generation. Some people go, when he says to the 10th generation, that just means never. You can never get there. We're not going to actually count that many generations. You probably lose count at some point. But because then at the end of verse 3, when he's talking about the Ammonite and the Moabite, he says to the 10th generation, and then he says forever. So it could be that. However, there is going to be one when we get into verse 8 where he says to the third generation. So maybe there should be some counting here. The assembly of the Lord, again, it excludes those of illegitimate birth. Again, probably applied to the civil leadership, we think. Verses 3 through 6, the Ammonites and the Moabites are excluded from the congregation of Israel. And he says they didn't give you bread and water. You remember the children of Israel come out and the Moabites are up there and they go, hey, we just need to kind of pass through. We just need to get through your land so we can get where we're going. And they come out and they go, you're not coming through our land. You can go around. They go, well, we'll just stay on the King's Highway. We won't even take anything. Anything we do take, we'll pay you for. And they wouldn't let them go through. And so they did treat them cruelly on the way to the promised land. But there's also about the Moabites and the Ammonites. They had a pretty disgraceful beginning. If you remember Genesis chapter 19, these are the illegitimate kids from Lot. Do you remember Lot? He gets out of Sodom. Lot's wife turns. She turns into a pillar of salt. They get up into the mountains. The two daughters go, man, what's going to happen to our father's name? We're not going to have anybody. So do you remember what they do? They get their dad drunk. They take turns on different nights after they get him drunk of sleeping with him, getting pregnant by him, and that's where these nations are born. Pretty distant from the people of God, right? But then they also then hired Balaam, the son of Beor. You remember that whole thing in Numbers chapter 22 through 24, where they're like, hey, we're not going to be able to defeat them, so let's get this guy to curse them, and if he'll curse them, then maybe we could be victorious over them. And again, so the same application, he goes, these guys, they're not welcome in the assembly of the Lord. Now, one of the reasons that we do think that this would be civilly and not in the religious life. Now, and again, Zach touched on this quite a few weeks ago now, where it's like there's some people that were just like, that kind of came into the family of God, and there was other people who did not come all the way into the family of God, right? Kind of like a resident alien who would not kind of assimilate to the culture or kind of become part of the culture. Most of them, if they wanted to enjoy what you would get in Israel, you had to become a Jew, right? You'd go and get circumcised, you'd become a Jew, you'd assimilate into the culture. Other guys would not, and so they didn't get the full blessing of God. So we know that some people were allowed into the religious life, and if you remember, the Moab should sound a little familiar. There was a young lady named Ruth who was a Moabite, and she was definitely welcomed in to the family of God after she forsook where she came from. So to say that no one from Moab up until the 10th generation or even forever could ever join, we wouldn't see that as accurate. And so I'll just read what this guy Merrill says. Disbarment from the assembly was not synonymous with the exclusion from the covenant community itself, as the one example of Ruth, the Moabitess, makes clear. There can be no doubt that Ruth was welcomed among the people of the Lord as one of their own. You remember in her famous speech to Naomi, what does she say? She says, your people will be my people, but at the very end, what does she say? And your God will be my God. And however it was, she was received in, and then she's even in the lineage of Jesus. So we're going to go ahead and say that they're probably talking, again, civil leadership here. Verses 7 and 8, don't abhor the Edomite. He's your brother. And he says, and you cannot abhor the Egyptian because you were an alien in his land. The children of the third generation born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord. The Edomites, they're ethnically related to Israel. Edom is Esau, right? Jacob's brother Esau was the father of the Edomites. Therefore, Israel was commanded not to abhor the Edomite. Starting with the third generation, they'd be able, if they came and assimilated into the culture, they would be able to be a part of leadership in Israel. Now with the Egyptians, this one's a little different, isn't it? The Egyptians were also to receive more favor than the Moabites or the Ammonites because Israel was a guest in Egypt for 400 years. And you go, wait, they weren't guests. They were slaves. But you know what I like? I like how one person writes this. He says, though the years Israel spent in Egypt were hard, God had a great purpose for them. Egypt was like a mother's womb for Israel. They went in as a large family. They came out as a distinct nation. There was a protection that happened while they were there. They were preserved. They were brought in actually very kindly, you remember, because of the famine that was happening, and Joseph was a part of that. But Pharaoh was okay with them coming in and taking care of their family, but then they were able to become a great nation there. So he goes, so you can't hate either of these two guys, and even to the third generation, if they want to immigrate here and they want to make this place their home, then they're going to be able to do that. Verses 9 through 14 is a nice one. When the army goes out against your enemies, keep yourself from every wicked thing. He's going to talk about two things that would seem to make someone unclean. One of them we talked about back in Leviticus chapter 15, and that's verses 10 and 11. It says, if there is any man among you who becomes unclean with some occurrence in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come inside the camp, but it'll be when the evening comes that he'll wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may come into the camp. God commanded that ceremonial cleanness be observed even in the army during war. When we saw this in Leviticus, and you can go back to Leviticus 15, that we'll see probably what this occurrence in the night, it very much probably refers to a nocturnal emission and the cleansing ceremony that was described in Leviticus 15, 16 to 18. After observing the ceremonial washing, that soldier would be able to come back into the camp. Again, a guy named Merrill says, though the passage in no way suggests that bodily emissions, whether or not of a quasi-sexual kind, are in themselves inherently evil or even culturally impure, it does underscore the importance of proper time and place for things. And so he would be unclean for the evening. He would kind of, go do his washing, and then he would be able to come back when the next day started. The next part, verses 12 through 13, you don't usually think of number 2 being the easier one to talk to, but it is in this case because we did those first verses first. Verses 12 and 13, it says you got to have a place outside the camp where you can go out, and you need to have an implement among your equipment. And when you sit down outside, you shall dig. And you're going, implement? What are you talking about? Sit down. What are you talking about? Well, then he says, so that you could turn and cover your refuse. You can't just go to the bathroom anywhere and it just be all over the place. Even you pick up your dog's, droppings, pick up your own droppings, type thing. So God commands sanitary cleanliness among the army of Israel. In addition to the weapons, each soldier had to carry a shovel. So he goes, so when you go to the restroom, dig a hole, bury it. Not only would other people not step on it, he goes, the Lord walks among your camp. And that's real interesting, isn't it? Israel had the tabernacle, they had the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized the presence of the Lord among them. Now, and sometimes they'd go out to battle. A lot of times they'd go out to battle, they would take the Ark of the Covenant with them. They're taking God's presence with them. Not that God wasn't already going to be in that place, or that God isn't in all places already. But he doesn't just stay in that box, and that's the thing. They're like, well, the box is standing over there. The shiny box is over there. That's where God's presence is. No. God's everywhere. He's omnipresent. And he says he walks around the camp, and so he's not just restricted to that place. And so he goes, keep the place clean. Keep the place clean. He says, therefore your camp shall be holy. Again, they're a set-apart people. God's people are to be a holy people, set-apart people. Not just doing what everyone else does. Again, I don't know what the culture was at the time, but it would seem because he has to tell them to do that other people are like, oh, you got to do what you got to do. Just try not to step in it, But here he's going, no, we're going to be different. We're going to be a different people. We're going to clean that up because he may see no unclean thing among you and then turn away from you. However that works, God is calling his people to be different and holy. Verses 15 and 16, you shall not give back to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. He may dwell with you in your midst, in the place which he chooses, within one of your gates, where it seems best to him. You shall not oppress him. Now, this is probably, and I think everyone kind of agrees on this. You remember, we talked about how it was possible in the nation of Israel that if someone had kind of come upon hard times, they could sell themselves as a slave to someone else, right? You guys remember this? This is not what that's talking about. We're probably talking about an asylum seeker from a foreign land who had escaped as a slave. Very common in the ancient world that people were enslaved. And so if someone was able to get free, break free, and they managed to get themselves into Israel, then he says to them, you don't give him back to his master. Now, there's some reasons for this stuff. What we have seen just in human history as slavery goes, usually it involves kidnapping. It involves stealing someone from where they were and then selling them for money so that they can go somewhere else and work. And really everyone throughout all of history has done this. Okay? So there is something about this, though. If you remember back to Exodus chapter 21, verse 16, and you can go back and look at it or you can highlight it later, the kidnapping of a person was a capital offense in Israel. If you kidnapped a person, you were put to death, whether it was a child or whether it was an adult to sell into slavery. Because usually kidnapping required being kind of either brought into slavery or sold into slavery. And so he's going, you're not going to be party to that. You're not going to be party to do it. And he even tells him that you're not going to oppress this guy. It would be very easy, wouldn't it? That someone escapes from slavery and you go, oh, come on right in. Dishes are right over here, and all of a sudden you go, yeah, we'd be happy to help you. You can go ahead and join and you can be one of my slaves now. He goes, no, you can't oppress this guy. He just got his freedom. You're going to let him go free. Israel was to be a refuge for the oppressed slaves of other people. The refugee slave referred to everything that came from a foreign land. Otherwise, there would be legal complications. So when he says that he may dwell in your midst, an Israelite was not to take an escaped slave and enslave him again. The escaped slave was free and entitled to live whatever place he chose there in Israel. Now, the idea was that he would eventually assimilate again into the culture and he would begin to worship the one true God. And wouldn't there be a real good opportunity for that if he escapes from somewhere and all of a sudden he's embraced with open arms and he's helped along the way and he receives his freedom, that he'd go, wow, man, tell me about this God you serve. That was our memory verse for a while. And I know we haven't done a memory verse for a while on Thursday nights, but it was like, wait, no, those are two different memory verses. Sorry about that. Because we did seek first the kingdom of God, didn't we? What was the one we did? Okay, but there was the seek first the kingdom of God one. But the other one I'm thinking of, so I'm so sorry, is that men would see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven, right? That's kind of the idea here. That this guy would eventually see that to come and serve the God of Israel would be the right thing. Verses 17 and 18, again, some little PG-13 material here. There shall be no ritual harlot of the daughters of Israel, or a perverted person, one of the sons of Israel. You shall not bring the wages of a harlot or the price of a dog to the house of the Lord your God for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. Now, we talked about how coming out of Egypt and even other places in the known world at the time, it would seem that the people in Canaan were a little more debased. That some of the things that happened, but something that did happen all throughout the ancient world was there would be guilds of male and female temple personnel that participated in grossly sexual rituals designed to induce the various gods and goddesses to give their blessing. And so there was temple prostitutes, and it was just a normal thing. And so, you would go and you'd pay, and you would, what prostitutes are for. I don't need to explain that part. Anyways, what God is saying is he goes, you're not going to do that here. There's not going to be female prostitutes involved in the worship of God. The term perverted one, again, refers to a male prostitute, both which were very common in the pagan religions in Canaan and the ancient world. Now later, in 1 Kings 15 and also 2 Kings 23, we're told that Asa and also then later Josiah, they were guys, kings in Israel or in Judah, who put away the perverted persons. They got rid of the male prostitutes in the land. And this means that for some period before they were expelled, they were allowed to practice their sacred prostitution, which is clearly, the Bible tells us here, an abomination to the Lord. So God warns them in Deuteronomy. He goes, don't do it. We don't need this ritual harlotry happening here in Israel. And then you get to, hundreds of years later, and you have two kings that have to stand up and go, hey, do you remember God told us that we're not supposed to do this? And they had to expel those guys. And again, it just kind of speaks to this, our default setting is always going to be wickedness, right? Man will always do whatever he wants to do. And again, man, it's just wickedness, right? It's just wickedness. And it's so important to always take the word of God and just go, God, what do you say about a thing? Lord, how are we supposed to do these things? And so he's very clear to tell them none of this stuff. And then and you can imagine that some people in Israel would go, well, look at they just built a new temple. They just built a new place of worship from all the money they raised doing that. Why don't we could do a little bit of it and just take that money? And that's why he even goes in verse 18, don't bring the wages of a harlot or the price of a dog. That's talking to the guy about the male prostitute to the house of the Lord with any other vowed offering to go, look, I found a really good way to make some money for God. It's not a way to make money for God. We already talked about what the Bible has said about what biblical sexuality is. And again, and what is it? It's one man married to one woman, and that for life. That's biblical sexuality right there, right? That is what is allowed and in bounds by God, and God created it to be a wonderful thing. So, the pay for prostitution was never to be offered to the Lord. It's a common practice among many of the things that happened in the ancient world. Verses 19 and 20, you shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money or on food or anything that is lent out in interest. To a foreigner you can charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all to which you set your hand in the land which you are entering to possess. This would prohibit the stealing from fellow Israelites through unfair interest. He says no interest on money or food. So because we see the mention of food, this is similar to command to Exodus chapter 22. So it leads most people to understand that the interest was prohibited on loans made to the poor for their basic needs. It did not prohibit the taking of interest on loans that were not for relief of the poor. Deuteronomy 23:19 could be translated, you shall not lend at a biting interest, referring to the excessive interest or usury. The rate of interest in the near ancient world was exorbitant. Some contracts in northern Assyria in the 15th century BC show that interest was 50%. So that's what he's saying. You're not to charge this biting interest to others. Now, loans to foreigners were made, for business and commercial purposes, not to sustain the poor. And so he says, you're not going to do this to your brother. Again, we even see, if you remember back in, it was in Exodus, but certainly in Leviticus, when he talks about like, you're going to set free your brother at some point, right? That those who have gotten behind, there's the year, the seventh year where you're going to set them free. But then you get to that year of Jubilee in the 50th year where like all the debts are going to be wiped out and everyone has this chance to start over again. And so you don't just have generation after generation after generation who continues to get poorer and poorer, and generation after generation after generation who gets richer and richer and richer. And all of a sudden you have this great like divide. God goes, no, I've given this land to this people, and I've given this to you, and you're going to get it back. And so just because you're doing better in this season doesn't mean you're to charge this interest to your brother. Now, he says, again, if you're not in the people of God, you don't get the same promise. If you want to charge the neighboring nation interest, go right ahead, and there's that right there. So, okay, verse 21 through 23. When you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and it would be sin to you. But if you abstain from vowing, it shall not be sin to you. That which has gone from your lips you shall keep and perform, for you voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. So he says, if you're going to make a vow to the Lord, and we saw this earlier on in Deuteronomy. It's okay to make a vow to the Lord. It's okay to promise the Lord to do something, but if you're going to promise it, it's not a small thing. If you're going to promise something to God, you got to do what you said you're going to do. So God expressly commanded that Israel should be careful to keep their vows, to fulfill every oath, because the Lord would require it of you, and it would be sin to not do that. In many places, the breaking of oaths is standard business, but with God, it's not. It's sin. Payment of vows is often mentioned in the Psalms. It's mentioned in Isaiah, in Jonah, in Nahum. Jeremiah and Malachi speak of improper vows to the Lord. And so again, to make a vow to the Lord, to make a promise to God to do something, he goes, go ahead and follow through and do that thing. But he says this, but if you abstain from vowing, it's like, sometimes people can get caught up. Hey, I'm making a promise to the Lord. I'm going to promise to do this for the Lord. And again, back in this day, it could be something so simple as like, you know what? I'm going to give, my livestock is about to make more livestock. Do you say pregnant? I think you say pregnant. Do you say pregnant with livestock? I don't know. Sure. So say it's pregnant and you're like, I'm going to give all of it to the Lord. I'm going to give all this to the Lord. And then the neighbor hears it. He goes, man, that sounds really good. I'm going to give all of it to the Lord too. And then all of a sudden they're born. You're like, oh gosh, I didn't know I was going to have 3 of them. I thought I was just going to have 1. And now there's 3. And I said I was going to give it all to the Lord. And now, well, hey, he goes, if you promised it to the Lord, you got to give it. But now maybe there's another neighbor that's going, mine's pregnant too, but I'm not going to say anything. I kind of want this calf. I've kind of been waiting for a calf. Oh, come on, you're not going to give it to the Lord too like the rest of us? We're all given to the Lord right now. And he goes, I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to vow. Verse 22 says, if you abstain from vowing, it shall not be sin to you. Why? Because if you don't want to give it, don't give it. If you don't want to promise it, don't promise it. So just don't say it. It's kind of a lot easier to not say something, right? What's that phrase? It's better to kind of under-promise and over-deliver instead of over-promising and under-delivering. Yeah, sure, I'll be there to help you. You know what? Something came up, because what came up is I just don't feel like it anymore or whatever. So again, whether, toward the Lord, but the idea is that God's people are to be people of their word. Shouldn't have to even make oaths, especially now. Jesus talks about a few of these things in Matthew. He says, I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it's God's throne, nor by earth, for it's his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, it's the city of the great king, nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair black or white. But let your yes be yes, and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. We don't have to go around swearing. We don't have to go around making vows and promises to God or even people. So Jesus isn't totally forbidding oaths. He's just telling people that his people, that we should have integrity in the words that we use. And it would really make the oath unnecessary. Now he says again, if you abstain from vowing, it's not sin. God doesn't require the vow. God doesn't ask us to promise him things. So many times it's better to just not make the vow. Because he says that which has gone out from your lips, you need to perform. This shows how important it is to keep a vow once made. You probably have a note in your Bible, if you're not already thinking about it, in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 4 and 5. It says, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. That goes real good, doesn't it? It's just a lot better to not make the promise to the Lord or to someone else if you don't intend to take care of it. Verses 24 and 25, kind of the original drive-through of sorts. When you come to your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in a container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. So when travelers are passing through, they have a right to glean from what is there. So you imagine you're walking along the way. They didn't have restaurants, same as we do, especially as you're going through the wilderness, right? You pack a certain amount, but hey, I'm going to be walking through, hey, I'm hungry. I'll grab a little bit to eat. And when we get into chapter 24, you'll see that there's a part, verses 19 to 22, that really talk about how the owner of the land is supposed to not take every last piece of fruit off of the vine. They're supposed to leave something. Now, a lot of it's for the poor, so the poor can have something to eat. But they also have to go do the work to get that thing to eat. They don't just get it given to them. But there's going to be something left behind. So these guys, but maybe they come even before the harvest starts. And so he says, so when you're walking through the vineyard, go ahead and eat what you need to eat. You need to pick some grapes, eat the grapes. You need to pick something. You're hungry, go ahead and eat. If there's standing grain, he goes, go ahead and grab some of the grain, and you can use your hands, and you can sift that grain. You can go ahead and eat it. But what does he say? He says, don't put any in a container, though. Just take what you need and keep going. The Bible speaks of the way God provides for our daily needs, right? And in this way, he's going to take care of their daily needs through what was their neighbors. He goes, but you don't take any grapes and put them in a container and take them to go. No doggy bags, okay? You just get to take what you have. Just what you can carry in your hand, eat, And again, so you might slow down a little. It's like, this grape's pretty good. Maybe we'll walk a little slower for a few minutes here and just eat a little bit. That's fine. But if you're like, man, I'm really getting, and I'm sure they probably found a way to get out of this. It's like, okay, well, not a container, but maybe I can carry it some other way. Take your hat out, start putting it in your hat, whatever. The idea is, take what you need. Take what you need. It is so cool to kind of look through the way God has taken care of his people throughout the ages, right? And even, to read some church history, I think of guys like George Mueller. If you've never read his autobiography, I'd encourage you to. That like whatever the need is, the Lord will provide. What the need is, the Lord will provide. Just last Sunday in Philippians, right? Didn't we kind of end with that verse that's like, and my God will supply all your need according to his riches and glory. He knows how to take care of his people. He'll take care of his people. He'll take care of us. Again, the standing grain. He goes, go ahead and pick what you can from the standing grain. He goes, but don't get a sickle out. And all of a sudden you're like, I'll just harvest a little bit, That's not your field. Because then if you go any further from just taking care of your needs, what is it? It's stealing. That's one of the commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Don't take what's not yours. They're going to leave some of their field so that someone can be blessed along the way. Don't take more than you should. It's okay to provide again for the immediate needs. This is interesting because this is the law that Jesus and his disciples were operating under in Luke chapter 6 when they plucked the heads of grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. You notice they were accused by the Pharisees of breaking the Sabbath, but they were not accused of stealing grain. The Pharisees knew this law in Deuteronomy. So again, this is an advantage that was not to be abused. Okay, we're right in that in-between spot. It's 8:10. And it's kind of hard because the first 4 verses like really go together, but then it's the first 5 verses, and I don't think we have time for all of it. So we'll go back to that old phrase that no one ever blamed a preacher for ending early. Father, thank you so much for our time tonight in your word. Lord, it's so good to be your kid. And Lord, to just see all these things that you would write to your people, Lord. You're a God who does all things decently and in order. Lord, there's an order to the way you do things. And Lord, it's the principles behind these things that these people would honor you, God, with everything they do. And for us tonight, Lord, I know that it's like, I don't know that there's a ton of application in every part of this, but just to understand, Lord, tonight that who you are. You're a God who cares for his people. And so many of the things we saw tonight, Lord, just speak to your care and your concern and you being a good father and a good provider and a good protector, Lord. And so we just thank you for who you are tonight. Lord, my prayer is just that we would finish on a night like tonight and just know Deuteronomy 23 better than we did when we walked in. And so we love you, Lord. We thank you. We pray your blessing on the rest of our night, whatever it is that we do, whether we fellowship for a good while or whether we head home early, whatever it is, Lord, just bless us tonight. We love you and we thank you in Jesus' name.